These were given actually by Jacob to his sons, and you're going to find that they don't exactly match the tribes, and we're going to try to rectify that. The interesting thing that you're going to find now is that when Israel encamped in the wilderness after they had left Egypt, they created a giant zodiac in the desert. They put in the center of it their tabernacle and arranged the 12 tribes around it. 6 tribes went on the eastern side in a circle around it, and 6 tribes went around the western side. So they were creating a giant wheel of the zodiac. It won't follow exactly as you people who do astrology set up your charts. So the sequence is going to be a little different, and we'll see if we can verify each tribe's position by the blessings that they're given. I think first of all we'll just put them on the chart up here and fill them in. And you have charts that you can fill them in as well. And we're going to start as they did with Leo instead of with Aries. You astrologers would start with Aries, I'm sure, if you were setting up your chart. But we're starting with Leo because this is the tribe of Judah, the kingly tribe, and it is the first tribe to the east of the tabernacle. So it is where they started their arrangement. So Leo is Judah, the tribe of the sun, and I have the wrong notes. And Taurus is Issachar. Zebulun is Pisces. Reuben is Aquarius. Where are we? Gemini is Simeon and Levi. Aries is Gad. And Virgo is interesting because first this was Dinah in the blessing. It was the one daughter that was mentioned. She's not the only daughter that he had, but she's the only one that was mentioned in the blessing because she matches with Virgo. However, when the tribes were assigned, there was not a tribe assigned to the daughter. Instead, the blessing that was given to Joseph and to Dinah were split between Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So we're going to put Ephraim here. And Sagittarius, Manasseh. Cancer is Benjamin. Scorpio is Dan. Libra, I lost Libra, here's Libra. Asher. And Naphtali. So those are the 12. Now in the arrangement around the tabernacle, Levi was not included in the circle of the 12. So you're going to find we actually have 13 up here, including Levi, because we have Simeon and Levi under Gemini. Simeon and Levi were twins. And this is the reason that they are assigned to the tribe of Gemini, and that's mentioned in the blessing. However, Levi was not included in the circle of the zodiac when they set up the zodiac in the desert. Levi was the priestly tribe, and of course represents the center of the zodiac around which all things revolve. Or if we're relating that to Jesus and the 12, Levi represents Jesus, being the priestly tribe, the link with the source for all of the others. So Levi was put in the center of the circle, and the other tribes revolved around that, Levi being with the tabernacle. In the last chapter or the 49th chapter of Genesis, you'll find the blessings that were given to them, and some of these distinctions are made from these blessings. So if you have the Bibles, we'll read through that and see if we can pick out some of the astrological significance from these. If you have the Jerusalem Bible, I'm reading from a different version, so the words will be a little different. Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which will befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob." Beginning with this verse, the rest of it was in poetry, in the original Hebrew. Of course, it doesn't quite come out that way in English, but the rest of this is a hymn, a song, or a poem. "Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed and defiled it. He went up to my couch." Reuben on the chart is at Aquarius. He is associated with the instability of water, with dignity, with excellency of power and strength. But the weakness of the water is what led him into the problem. And there are some that would argue that this weakness relates him more to Pisces or to one of the other signs than to Aquarius. The particular authority I've used for setting this up is from, what's her name? I better get this straight. Corinne Helene, who has done the interpretation of the entire Bible from an astrological point of view. Many of these would be argued by various different astrologers, but as we go through, we'll see the other water signs also made clear, and this one, Aquarius, is probably the one that relates to Reuben being the firstborn. Simeon and Levi are brethren, meaning twins here. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitation. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honor be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and scatter them in Israel. I think it will occur to you now that that his blessing on both of these first two seem a little more like a curse, don't they? Do you have an idea why this curse is a blessing?
If they know it before, would they try to solve it?
Okay, sort of like that. I think another way to say it is that anybody who has an outstanding gift of any kind will probably realize that that gift is also their curse throughout life. Let me see if I can give a couple of examples. If you are really good with words, and because you're really good with words, it's really easy to win an argument with people who are not good with words, then what you find is that in trying to talk with someone, they automatically feel overwhelmed before you even start, and you really can't enter into the conversation. It's actually a curse as well as a blessing in communication. The very fact that you can do it well can be inhibiting to other people, and what could have been a blessing in relationships can be a curse in relationships. If you can find that what is being told you here are both sides of the things that you want to work on. Or let me see if I can say it another way. If you're told all the good things about yourself, it doesn't do you any good. Those things are already there. If you are told what is likely to be the trouble that you come into because of those good things, then you look for that. You are set up for it, and you can make preparation. You can work on that side of your consciousness that is going to get you into that kind of trouble. The blessing that anyone needs to receive is to see their weakness, not to see their strength. The strength is going to be there anyway. But if I can find what there is about my consciousness, my personality, my nature, my inclinations, that are most likely to get me into trouble, if I see that in advance, I have a blessing. And anything that is a weakness in me or a tendency toward a problem that I can turn around becomes the opposite strength. I become as strong in the other direction as I was weak originally in the first direction. So I know those things that I must overcome. And the thing about your astrological sign, whatever it is that it gives you both strengths and weaknesses. If you know the weaknesses of your sign, there are one or two ways that you can respond. I very often hear a person who is Libra, for example, saying, I never can make up my mind about anything, and I know that it's because I'm Libra. To my thinking, that is exactly the wrong way to respond to your sign. If you know that you're Libra, the first thing that you do is you make sure that what you work on is the ability to make decisions, to bring balance and to make it balance without making it confusion or argument within yourself. So you don't settle for being the epitome of the weakness of that sign. Knowing the weakness, you work on that first, and you make it your strength. And so even though you are Libra, you are not saddled with what people traditionally think of as the weakness of Libra. So knowing that and being able to change it in your consciousness is the nature of the blessing. Simeon and Levi also are told, in being Gemini, that what they're working with is an ability to be so sharp in communication and in thinking that the intelligence they have can be a cruel instrument. So if you unfold what Jacob is saying to them, the very reason that it can be cruel is because it is superior in its ability to weigh things and see them, to argue, to communicate. So the blessing is sort of hidden in the curse, but what he wanted to warn them about was the curse. The next one, Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise, thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies, thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion. Who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. Shiloh means peace, and refers to the coming of the Christ, and speaks of Judah here as having the scepter, the ruling scepter of the king. So it's the tribe of royalty, and it's also symboled by the lion, which is Leo. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be, binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. So it's also prophesying the coming of the Christ out of the children of this tribe. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea. He shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zion. So Zebulun up here is Pisces. Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good, and that the land it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. Issachar is Taurus, the bearer of the burden. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Dan represents Scorpio, and there's an interesting thing about this one. He is symbolized here by an adder in the path, but he also is referred to as salvation and judgment. Scorpio is a dual sign of transmutation. In its lowest, it is destructive. In its highest, it is the new. It is actually the Christ in its highest form. In its lowest form, it is Judas. So Judas of the 12 was Scorpio, but so was Jesus. When the lower form is done away with and the higher form takes its place, that highest form is the Christ. So this is referring to Scorpio as the element or the ability of transformation, new birth, transmutation, change, metamorphosis. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. So it speaks mostly of that ability to be destroyed, to rise again, to start again. And this is Aries, the pioneer, the one of the short-lived strength, but the ability to start again and again and again, even when overcome. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Sounds like Cancer, doesn't it? Okay, well, Libra's that way too. The love of the balance, the beauty, the poetry is what is referred to here. The love of beauty. Naphtali is a hind let loose. He giveth goodly words. So he is a teacher, and is represented by the hind, or which is an antelope or a deer, and you might associate him either with Sagittarius or with Capricorn. I personally would have associated him with Sagittarius. We're using Corinne Helene's attempt here, and that's one that I think that I might argue with her about. The next blessing is for Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well. Now get this one, because this is the most important of the blessings perhaps. The prophecy here, remember, is for the future of each one of these. And the future of this one is obviously not referring to Joseph at all, but is referring to Jesus. So the blessing here is the blessing of Jesus in his former incarnation as Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the well. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him, but his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of the Father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So the same words that are given here of the fruitful bough are a description also given to Jesus during his lifetime. The fruitful bough that was pruned by the keepers of the vineyard, and the people that were born through his ministry were the branches on that bough. So there's a reference here to the Kabbalah and the fulfillment of it, and this blessing makes Joseph Tipperet on the tree, the source from which the branches come. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. And Benjamin is Cancer, the place of the feeding, traditionally on the tree. The sons of Joseph then are given the other two. I would have said Capricorn and Virgo. We have it on the chart as Sagittarius and Virgo, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now in the arrangement around the circle, you have on the east Leo, Taurus, or let's do it by the tribes: Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. On the western side, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, Naphtali. And in the center, Levi. So if you want to arrange another circle on your chart that way, you will see the succession that they used, which is different from the Chaldean succession that we are using. On your chart, with going from Aries around the circle, you'll find that a different succession than the zodiac that they used in the wilderness. And that would be the basis of the difference between Jewish astrology and Chaldean astrology, which doesn't make an important difference in the interpretation of the 12. The succession of the zodiac is the same. The names given are different, and the interpretations are essentially the same. So it's really a rearrangement of the importance, not of the literal procession of the equinoxes. I think the important thing for us to recognize here is that the whole of the teaching throughout the Bible is of these 12 colleges of life. And to identify these colleges very well is sometimes difficult, and to do it astrologically using traditional astrological descriptions is not that easy, but it's not hard when you look at it in this way. The challenges beginning on the eastern horizon, the challenges are to know yourself. So the first school of life is in getting to know who I am, and that is perhaps the hardest of all the schools. It is much more difficult to see ourselves as we are than to see other people as they are, it seems. It's harder for us to see ourselves than for other people to see us. Initially, of course, what we want to learn about who we are is confused by identification with what we have built. So the biggest challenge that we have to overcome is changing our point of identity from what we did to what we are. There are several points there that we can make. One, for example, is our tendency in growing up to identify with the things that we have done, and for our parents to do the same thing. When a parent says to a child, "Look what you have done, you're a bad boy," then they have confused what we did with what we are. They have also confused us, making us what we did instead of what we are. when parents learn to say, look what you did, that was wrong, what you are is a beautiful person who does not deserve to do that sort of thing. I mean, what you did is not deserving of what you are. If that separation, that distinction were made very, very clear by our parents as we're growing up, that would be one of the steps in separating what we do from what we are. But there's another one that's just as important. We have a tendency to identify with the body and the personality. And in fact, it's almost certain that when you speak of yourself, what you mean is your body with its personality, its habits, its beliefs, the identification that you have set up about yourself. And the overcoming of this first college of life is the discovery that my body is not who I am, it is something that I made. And I made it in a particular way for a particular purpose. I built into it both strengths and weaknesses. I built into it likes and dislikes, talents, abilities, inclinations. And all of those things that I built into it, including congenital disease, illness, structural weakness in the body, all of those things I selected very carefully, and I put them there so that they would tell me something about my challenges of life. So even the imperfections built into the body are part of the perfection that I should recognize. It's part of this first challenge. I must see my imperfections as deliberate instruments or road signs pointing me in the direction that I should go in life. And instead of thinking that's what I am, I must think of my body, this is what I built to guide me in a particular direction, to give me tools for going the direction that I must go. Ultimately, what I must learn about myself, about who I am, is I am God. And until that realization becomes so real, so clear, and so sure that my body, my emotions, my mind, all of these instruments become servants to me. They become my 12. They become my apostles when I overcome the challenges of this first school of life. The second school is called the school of I have, what belongs to me, my property. And once again, I'm going to deal with my emotions, my abilities, my talents, my mind, my body. All of these are things that I have. But I can't deal with I have in relation to those until I have dealt with I am. Because when I haven't dealt with I am, I think that these things that I have are who I am. And so these two schools get confused one with the other. I can deal with I have when I know what I am, and what I thought I am is now what I have. Am I sufficiently confusing you? Okay. I have also, of course, refers to possessions, material possessions, responsibility for having things in life, whether opportunities or talents or anything else, and the responsibility for taking care of the things that might not be mine. For example, I have might refer to my children. Notice I said my children, and that in itself is a problem. When we think of children as our children, we have already formed a wrong relationship with them, and we are ready for the Abrahamic sacrifice. Because these children are not yours. And one of the things that we might first learn in this school of I have is that when a child is born to me, it appears that biologically, chemically, my body has the ability to create tissue, blood and cells, a physical body, but there is nothing about the chemistry or the biological nature of my body that can give life to that child. The life in that child, the conscious being in that child that will inhabit that body, is the child of God. the life that belongs to it. I may have given birth to the body, but God gave birth to the life, and every child that I have is God's child. And I am caring for that child, and if I confuse whose child that is, then I can have a wrong relationship should God take that child. If a child dies and I think God took my child from me, I had a wrong relationship with the child in the first place. If, on the other hand, I know that I am caring for God's child and He loves that child more than I do, then I have a security about that child. I know that He's cared for, not because I asked God to take care of the child for me, but because God is taking care of His own child for Himself. And as I teach that child, as I live with that child in the growing up, I live with it with a consciousness. I have a responsibility. I have been given the opportunity by God to teach His child and to look after it, and I may look after that child in a much more beautiful way, recognizing that I have been trusted by God to look after His own child that He loves. And for Him to trust me that much gives me a responsibility that might be even greater than caring for my own child. So I have becomes a different school when I recognize who I am and who the child is and what our relationship is with the source or with God. I think if I begin to recognize my ability to think as a sacred instrument and learn something about how it functions, what makes it work, what it's supposed to do for me, one of the things that I might discover is that a usual relationship with the mind is that the mind goes where it wants to go. It very easily becomes a master instead of a servant. How often have you found that perhaps when you're going through a feeling of rejection, a relationship has broken up, and you would like to be able not to think about it. You would like to be able to turn your mind to beautiful things. You would like to be able to get on with life and not be hurt. But your mind dictates what you think about. Your mind and your emotions are victimizing you. They are being the master instead of the servant, and it just won't behave itself. Or another example may be in trying to meditate. You find that your mind won't shut up, the chatter won't go away, and the things that you don't want to think about, you are thinking about. So the third school is the school of forming a servant-master relationship between yourself and your servants. First of all, the mind. And then the very next one, the emotions. And as you go around the circle, you're going to find above the horizon, below the horizon, a repetition of the lessons, in a sense. And an example is here. The things that I own, I have, and here other people have. And here I learn to relate to myself, I learn to relate to partners and others. So above the horizon, we are taking the lessons that we learn in regard to ourself and taking them to a new level. I think here, I think with a higher mind there, or I think and I perceive, I think and I understand. There is a difference between the ability to think and the ability to absorb or apply. And we might even think here in terms of concrete and abstract, or deeper or higher principles in these relationships. So there really are 6 schools taught on 2 different levels. But in these 12 different areas of life, everything that I ever will encounter as a lesson of life will fall into one of those colleges. But the complication of it all is that each one of these colleges interacts with the other colleges and they color one another. As we've already seen here, the lessons of I have are tied up with the lessons of I am. And I have is tied up with what other people have, and with my relationship with partners and so on. So they all influence one another. So there aren't really 12 lessons of life, there are 12 colleges. And each one of these colleges, someone has estimated, contains at least 3,000 different lessons. And each of these lessons colored by other lessons, other relationships, and this sort of thing. Throughout the Bible, these 12 colleges are referred to again and again. They are referred to in the challenges of Samson. Samson became an archetype of the person trying to take responsibility for his life, and he was met with 12 challenges. So the overcoming of those 12 challenges is the going through these 12 schools. So again and again, these 12 are referred to as the challenges of life, the servants within us. Particularly as the apostles, they were referred to as the 12 servants or the 12 students. So each of these 12 areas are abilities within me. One man I think who did a good job with this is the founder of Unity, who wrote a book called The 12 Powers in Man. And these 12 powers, again, are either 12 masters who make of us a slave and a servant, and that's when we are enslaved, or they are 12 servants that serve us. They are 12 students that we teach. We might think of these areas within us as being like a child, and we are parenting that child. The best way to learn to deal with my emotions, for example, is to realize that my emotional habits are part of my personality. We use this word personality to really mean a set of beliefs and habits that we formed very early in life. And almost certainly you formed this set of beliefs and habits and emotional reactions when you were about 3 years old. And you have been using this set of habits and reactions ever since. Which means that almost certainly you are emotionally a 3-year-old, even now. Because there are very few adults who have changed those habits since they formed them at age 3. It doesn't seem to occur to us that at age 30 we are at least as capable of forming emotional habits as we were at age 3. But if that does occur to us, then we need to go to work and do it. We need to find out, why did I form those particular emotional habits? What were the beliefs on which they were based? And we will almost always find, I based my beliefs on believing that what other people think about me is more important than what I think about myself. I probably believe that what people say about me, if it is insulting, has some effect on my value. And when we look at those beliefs as adults, we can see how irrational they are. They are so irrational, so obvious, that it seems really stupid and ridiculous that we are reacting emotionally on the basis of such irrational beliefs. But if we don't stop and look at that, we don't change the student in us to a servant or a co-worker with us. And when we begin to deal with this school of life and our relationship to it, we must put ourselves in the position of the center of this wheel, the responsible person. We are the Christ to these 12 apostles. And we must make these our apostles in order to become the Christ, which is what we're here to do. So our job as an awakening being becoming the Christ is to start gathering our apostles around us. And when we start looking at these 12 schools and gathering these 12 abilities or apostles or responsibilities around us, then we also overcome the weaknesses that are shown in our chart. All an astrologer can really tell us by casting a chart for us is where those strengths and weaknesses are likely to lie. But it doesn't mean that we can avoid the responsibility of any one of those 12 schools. We will deal with all of the 12 colleges, and we must gather all of our 12 apostles. An astrologer can tell us which one of those apostles is going to give us the most trouble. But we will need to take responsibility for knowing who I am, what I have, what I think, how I feel, what I do with my life, my career, my expressions. I express, I create, which is the next one over there. I relate, I create, and I analyze, Virgo. So I must take responsibility for all of those, both in relation to myself and in relation to others. And when I have gathered those 12 and they are working with me as a servant, then I and my 12 take on the challenge of changing the world. Because what we really have here is the whole zodiac, the influence upon the earth. And when I am changing my relationship with the zodiac around me, I'm changing my relationship with heaven. The zodiac is the heaven, which affects the earth. So if I take responsibility for the heaven, I will automatically change the earth. Okay, questions? We have one back here.
Yes, I have quite a few questions. Oh, this isn't on, is it? Is it? Okay. Well, I have quite a few questions. You want them one at a time or all at once?
Maybe one at a time will do better.
Okay. On the relationship between Gemini and Sagittarius, I've always had difficulty understanding Sagittarius in its description as the higher mind or the intuitive mind. And I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to associate that with the right hemisphere of the brain, the intuitive mind, as in contrast to Gemini as the rational mind. Or is it something else?
Well, you could do that. It's not exactly correct because Gemini is, remember, two-sided, and it does deal with both hemispheres of the mind, but it is primarily the left hemisphere. And the understanding that comes in Sagittarius is probably primarily the right hemisphere. But that is not what differentiates between the lower mind and the higher mind. The thing that differentiates is what they're thinking about. The lower mind is the thinking about Earth and the things that I have to do, thinking about myself and my relationship with the Earth. The higher mind is thinking about the philosophical problems. In Gemini, I am thinking, how do I deal with the Earth and its challenges? In Sagittarius, I'm thinking, why do I deal with the Earth and its challenges? So it's higher concepts, not a difference in the function itself.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, and the next question is about Scorpio. It's traditionally associated with death, sex, and regeneration. These are the three concepts associated with Scorpio. And I can understand how death and regeneration go together because regeneration generally is preceded by death to an old life, the old ways of thinking and so on. But how does sex fit into that?
Sex is the power of regeneration. And here we're not talking just about a genital function. We're not talking about just making love between two individuals. We're talking about the life-giving force that is available in in reproduction. We are talking about the first chakra. We're talking about the source of power in man, the vitality, the life force. That life force that can give life to a new child is also the life force that must regenerate me. And if it remains devoted to the expression of appetites and emotions in me, there will be no regeneration. If, on the other hand, I make a change in consciousness in what I am applying that power to, it will regenerate me. So it's not so much the sexual function that we're referring to, but it is the use of the reproductive power in me for reproducing me on a higher level.
Okay, thank you. That does make sense. I wonder why I didn't think of it. All right, and then the last two are the 11th and 12th houses, Aquarius and Pisces. I just have difficulty seeing them as the opposite of the 5th house and the 6th house. I can understand the opposite of the other pairs, but I don't quite see the 11th house as being the opposite of the 5th, and the 12th is the opposite of the 6th.
Okay. Leo is going to be making sure that people see me the way that I want to be seen. This is the way I present myself to the world. And this is the way I relate to other people. This is the selfish side of my public relations, the image that I want to project, and this is the way that I see myself. But over here, I'm dealing with the way that other people see me. And in Aquarius, I'm going to be doing for other people what I am doing for myself here.
All right. Yes, I agree with that.
So, in a sense, this is the opposite. This is outgoing, doing things for the world, getting involved in making a difference, social consciousness. But this is a consciousness of my needs. And here, the 12th house is a matter of being able to see the forest, whereas here I am looking at trees. It's learning to see the greater picture of what I was picking apart. This is analyzing, and this is putting together the entirety. It really relates to the entire zodiac and not just to this one, but it still is the opposite of this. Whereas I look at the trees here and examine them, here I don't notice the trees in particular, I see the forest. Does that make sense?
I think I need to think about that for a while. But yes, I think it does. Okay, well, thank you very much. You know, when you explain something that way, I suddenly realized that the whole thing, all the pieces kind of fall into place.
Good.
Thank you very much.
When you were speaking about Aries, you were saying something about creating children, and that God really created the children. You also referred to that when we really become aware of who we are God. I'm aware that you have talked about us as being God, if we conceptualize or become aware of who we really are, and yet you also refer to God in another sense. Could you kind of bring those together some way or other?
Okay. Let's say that God is a vast ocean, and I have a cup. Now, if I've taken a cup of water from that ocean, it's ocean water. It's the same quality, it contains all the same things, it's the same nature. It is not the whole ocean, but it is of the nature of the ocean. So my cup within me is God. It is filled with that quality that is God, but it's not the ocean. It is not all that God is, but it is precisely the same nature. And when I know that that is what's contained in me, that's my real identity, then I grow with this option. When I build my physical body, I build for my cup a vessel through which it can express. But in building that vessel, I build a vessel that has a brain, and that brain is really an instrument designed to help that instrument think and relate to its earth. Now, it's designed really only to get along in the earth. It is not designed for the purpose of relating to its source. Within that cup of water, or that cup of God, is this ability to relate to the source. But when I begin to function in this reality, I learn to use my brain, and it tells me about the reality around me. And I'm going to refer to that brain mind as the result mind. I can spend most of my life thinking of it as my mind, and in fact, I may tend to think of that as all that my mind is. That's the limit of my mind, because it is what I've experienced using to think. One day I may discover that there was a mind, identifiably me, before my brain existed. There was an intelligence that was very much at work making some decisions about the nature of the body that I was building. My brain did not yet exist. That mind was helping to form that brain. So there are two minds there, a cause mind that made my brain, a result mind that is my brain. The result mind is designed only to help a physical instrument relate to a physical world. Jesus said it this way: whatever is born of flesh is flesh. And the flesh mind is appropriate to tell us about the things of flesh. But if we want to understand the things of spirit, then we have to get our information from a different mind, a different consciousness. So initially, I'm still thinking with what I call my mind, which is a result mind, a brain mind. But this brain mind becomes aware that there is another source of knowledge. And so it tries to stop being the source of thought and listen. And it listens to another consciousness and gets information from it. Now, initially, that's me talking with the source in me. That's me talking with God in me. And I can even make a distinction. This is me doing the talking, my brain mind, and this is God in me talking to me. Over a period of time, I might become aware that this God mind in me is superior in every way to my brain mind. And so instead of just talking with it once in a while, I talk with it more and more and more, and I find myself using this brain mind less and less and less. If eventually that brain mind is not doing my thinking for me at all anymore, but that God consciousness in me is doing my thinking, then I will actually change my belief about who and what I am. I will realize that the brain mind was not me at all. It was an instrument I was using, and I will transfer my point of identity. When that eventually happens, I become the Christ. I am thinking with the mind of Christ. And what I now am is God occupying a body and God incarnate on the earth. I've changed my point of identity. So there's a growth process toward that, and the real way to start is to become conscious of that source and communicate with it and grow into it. Okay?
You mentioned Abrahamic sacrifice tonight, and you spent quite a bit of time talking about it 2 or 3 nights ago. I've had a little trouble with that since the first night. One of the things that occurs to me is that, you know, as far as children and material things, I don't think I have any problem there, but the thought of my health occurred to me. Is that within the scope of what you're talking about?
Yes, I think so. As a matter of fact, we are about to move out of Genesis and into the wisdom literature. And in the wisdom literature, we'll encounter the book of Job, which is written precisely about that. The book of Job, the premise of it says, you can be happy as long as you have your health, your children, your money, all of these things around you. It should be very easy to be happy. Interestingly, most people are not, even when they have all of those things. But theoretically, if we have money, family, health, a good mind, good job, possessions, all of those things, we can be healthy. But the book of Job says, what if I take all of those things away from you? Are you still capable of being joyous, happy, healthy, loving, and having a right relationship with God? If not, you have not made the Abrahamic sacrifice, and health is one of the primary things that is referred to there. Your health, even your sanity. Anything that you make more important than your relationship with God is God to you, including your health. Okay.
When you referred to moving from the brain mind to the source mind, would you comment on how the left and right brain relate there, and also how intuition relates?
Okay. Intuition is really the function of the right brain, and the sensory mind is more left brain. Now, when we begin to be aware of the higher mind or God consciousness in us, we're going to be using both of those sides of the brain to relate to it. In meditation, we use primarily the right brain. And in meditation, through the use of intuition, and more than that, through the use of the ability to listen with right brain thinking, we can receive intuition from God consciousness. There is technically a difference between intuition and receiving information from God consciousness, but the technical difference is that intuition is an ability to sort of listen at random and get thoughts that guide us in a direction that may help us. We intuit something. Getting information from God consciousness is a process of asking and receiving, or prayer and meditation. A whole conversation, communicating and absorbing, listening. The left brain is used to relate to this God consciousness in recognizing that everything that is happening around me all day, everybody that comes into my life, every situation that comes into my life is designed by my source, my teacher, which is God within me. God is trying to tell me things about the way that I relate. It is my left brain that will notice how people are reacting to me and how I'm setting myself up for situations. So I want to use both sides of the mind to get to know that source. Eventually, I will transcend either of those sides of the mind. I'm going to use them both, and I'm going to go beyond them to the source mind that allows them to function. And it doesn't mean that the brain would stop functioning when I start using God consciousness. It simply means that I stop depending upon beliefs and prejudices, opinions and habits to do my thinking, and that the source of decisions comes from total dependence on that guidance. But that is using both sides of the brain to absorb it. It's a new way of thinking. Okay, there was a question down here.
Diane and I, when you were going over the blessings, Diane and I were really amazed at how the words in here were so different from things that you were saying, what you were reading, your version. For example, like you said crown and we read brow, and you said old lion and we read lioness. And it seems that...
What version do you have?
The Revised Standard.
Uh-huh. Okay, we have three different versions here. They have the Jerusalem Bible, I have the King James, that went into the accuracy and authenticity of the translation of that Bible than any other Bible in history. So it's probably the most authentic and the easiest to understand at the same time. And expensive, yeah. Inexpensive. Oh, yeah, because you can get it in paperback now. But it is more expensive usually because it's huge and has all that extra information. And there are various different Bibles that have a lot of helps with them which make a difference too, because one of the things that you want to do in translation or interpretation of the Bible when you're reading, every one of these names that you're going to encounter, from Abraham to Isaac to Sarah to Lot, Jacob, all of them have meanings. And it's a really good idea to have a Bible that has a dictionary in it that will give the meaning of all of these names, because the person will make more sense. When you realize that, for example, when Moses wrote about this man, Abraham, he called him the father of our nation. Now, whether that was literally his name when the man was alive is not something anybody really knows. But Moses wanted to refer to him in a particular role, and he did. Perhaps that's the reason that he's called father of a nation, is because Moses may have not have known who that man is. In fact, he may only have been, in Moses' teaching, he may have been created by Moses as a kind of an archetype individual who never existed as a distinct individual. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that that's the case. I'm saying that's one of the possibilities and one of the interpretations of who Abraham was. There are other reasons why Abraham was named father. But in any case, when you read him as father and read the others with the meaning of the name instead of the name, then it will help you with the interpretation of the story that you're reading. So that's one of the things that you'll want to get, is one with a Bible dictionary that will give you the meaning of the names. Most Bibles have some sort of dictionary in the back, but they don't give you the meaning of the names. They give you the meaning of various different words throughout it. So make sure that the dictionary in your Bible has a meaning of the proper names.
Can I get in a few more?
Yep.
Oh, good. I've noticed throughout the Old Testament that it seemed to be a good thing to fear God. And in the New Testament, I haven't found that at all. And I want to know why. And that's, of course, what I grew up with, too, fearing God. And I never could have a relationship with God until I started studying. Why was it that way?
Okay. What we run into there when where the Old Testament says to fear God is another problem with transliteration of words. Because the word as it is used there is a word for respect and awe. And the reason it's translated fear instead of respect is because that there is, in the Hebrew language, there is a quality of respect that is so respectful that it would not occur to me to disobey. It is akin to fear in the sense of I would be afraid not to respond appropriately, but not a fear in the sense of a negative that makes it a fear of punishment. It is a fear of violating the appropriateness of my relationship. There's a quality of love that makes me think twice before I do anything that would infringe on that love. And I may call that a fear. I'm afraid of tampering with something so precious. But I don't really mean fear. I mean, I choose not to live with the result of violating that relationship. Okay. So I think that you should take the word out. Fear is definitely not an appropriate word there. Another thing that you need to recognize too is that we're talking about a primitive people building a relationship with a God that blessed them when they did right and punished when they did wrong. And so there was a fear there, but that's not what the esoteric teachers were trying to teach. It is what the uneducated tribesmen had a terror of relating to God in a wrong way. Certainly Moses did not. Moses is perhaps one of the best illustrations of this right relationship with God. He argued with God, he bargained with God, he challenged God, and in one place he communicated with God, and God said, I'm just going to wipe out the whole bunch of them. And Moses replied to him, if you're going to wipe them out, wipe me out too. I don't want anything to do with you if you're going to do that to them. And to have that kind of relationship doesn't suggest fear. It suggests a strong, healthy self-respect and a respect for that source as well, a respect for the power of it, but at the same time an acceptance of it.
Okay. I've got more.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
The same thing is done in the Oriental tradition with the I Ching. They use the word fear, at least in transcribing into English, according to the first trigram, truth or thunder. And they describe it there as getting a good cold shock at looking at the absolute truth. You know, if you're stuck in the middle of your problems, you get a good straight look at the truth, and it is going to shake you, but that shaking is sometimes needed to shake you out of your old habits and into an awe of the power of God in the universe. So I think it's the same type of translation of fear.
Okay.
This is related to a couple of nights ago. You talked a lot about initiates. And I was wondering, when we reach the point that we really want to know our source, and we take every step available in that direction, do we become the initiate? I mean, at what point does one become the initiate?
Okay. Just wondering if I should answer that right now or a little bit later. The thing that I'm thinking is that that next week when we go into the Gospel of John, we're going to talk about the steps of initiation. And I think that's probably the most appropriate time to deal with that. We'll talk about what initiation is, when it occurs for us, how to know when it's occurred, what the next initiation coming is, and so on. We'll cover that then. She had some more here.
The meaning of burnt offerings, peace offerings, where did that tradition come from? Is it putting the animal self on the... And it doesn't feel quite right to me to interpret that.
All right, I'll go ahead and answer that now because it's the next thing that we're coming to. But we probably ought to take a break first. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about the tabernacle, the burnt offerings, the priesthood of Israel, and how that ancient primitive form of worship came about, and the change from that form of worship to a new form of worship a little bit later. So we'll take about 15 minutes and we'll come back and attack that. Okay, within all of these ancient religions, and in fact even in modern religions, though it is not as well recognized, there are two parts to the religion, called the esoteric and the exoteric. I suppose the best direct translation of those two words is the inner and the outer, or the hidden and the obvious. The obvious part of a religion, the exoteric, is what the people are told and what they practice, perhaps without ever thinking too much about the esoteric behind it. The esoteric is what that person who wants to understand with the higher mind and is not satisfied with the form probes into and finds as the cause behind the result that he works with. Perhaps the simplest illustration of this relationship between esoteric and exoteric was a ceremony that happened once a year in Israel at the time of the building of this tabernacle. The people of Israel were called together on the Day of Atonement, and a goat was selected from the tribes, and this goat was called the scapegoat. And that's where the term comes from, in case you wondered. The scapegoat was in the center of the people. They all gathered around. The scapegoat was in the center, and the people were instructed to think of all of the errors, mistakes, sins that they had committed throughout the year. And they essentially visualized those sins being piled on the back of the scapegoat, and then the scapegoat was driven out of Israel, out into the mountains to die. And their hope and prayer was that it didn't return. And they watched with dread, trying to make sure that it didn't, and did all sorts of things that they could do to get rid of it. Now, this was the exoteric practice, and this satisfied the people of Israel. I mean, they got rid of their sins on that day every year. So, from an exoteric point of view, that's really all they had to do. That was propitiation. That was getting rid of their guilt. Now, from an esoteric point of view, the priests, or the creator of this very simple little ritual, had something else in mind. They knew that in order to be aware of laws the year round, and to know that these laws were so demanding that it was almost impossible to live without the infringement of the slightest one of these laws. I mean, even losing your temper could be an infringement of one of these laws. And so if you have broken the law throughout that year, which everyone had, then the knowledge that you had broken that law left with you a sense of guilt. They knew that it was important for the people to have some way of getting rid of this guilt, and so they created this little ritual. From an esoteric point of view, it satisfied the people who cast their sins on this goat. Esoterically, the creator of the symbol knew that it was a psychological device to release the guilt of the people, so that in essence it didn't really do anything except serve as a psychological device for the release of the guilt of the people. Esoterically, it was a psychological device. Exoterically, it was a practice that satisfied the needs of the people, and perhaps you can see the simple relationship between the exoteric and the esoteric in that illustration. Sometimes the esoteric is not anywhere near that simple. It goes much, much deeper than that. Esoterically, there is a cosmology involved in every religion, and that cosmology is structured in a way to give it a form, a reality, a basis. And drama plays a great part in these ancient religions or mystery schools, because to think about something is one step in making it concrete. To illustrate it is another step and gives it more form and more substance. To act it out in drama internalizes it another step, or puts us in a closer contact with it, and in the dramatizing it, we activate what it is that we're talking about. And so the Hebrew religion was designed to activate the relationship between man and his source, and it seemed important to them to structure all of these pieces so that we can go through in ritual what we're going through in life. The religion attempted to reconstruct the cosmos and allow man to interact within it, and so the tabernacle was constructed. This tabernacle is a movable temple. It contains all of the parts that the stationary temples of Egypt had contained, and the parts that the temple in Jerusalem eventually would have. And it illustrated two things, which are essentially one, and this is where it becomes esoteric. To understand that the two things are one is where it became difficult, and at that point they didn't attempt to describe this to the common man, but The understanding of the relationship between these two things was what made a priest a priest. The first thing that this temple symbolizes is the body of man. With the feet here, and the consciousness, the highest part of the consciousness here, in this place. In fact, this point would be the crown chakra, or Kether in the Kabbalistic tree. And you have radiating out around this, you have the tribe of Levi surrounding the tabernacle and caring for it. And you have the 12 tribes of Israel surrounding that and radiating out as a great zodiac surrounding this center part, which was two things, the body of man and the body of God. And what they attempted to do in the practice of the tabernacle was change the body of man into the body of God, and that was the essence of the religion. And doing that meant something like this. They had here an altar which was called the altar of burnt sacrifice. And at the altar of burnt sacrifice, there was a daily practice of selecting from the flocks of Israel the most perfect lamb that could be found. It had to be absolutely without spot or blemish. The slightest discoloration in the skin, a freckle, could make it unacceptable as a sacrifice. There had to be no scratch, no sore, no break on the skin. Nothing in that lamb could be imperfect at all. And it was brought here as a burnt sacrifice. It was killed by a particular ceremony, and the ceremony was extremely precise in the way that it was done. In fact, it was so precise that the congregation that gathered here, which might be representatives of the various tribes, they never entered the tabernacle itself, but they worshipped outside it. The common man did, and the tabernacle was only entered by the priests. But the priests were gathered here at the time of sundown, and the people together read aloud a particular portion of the promise to the people from God. And the promise ended with the last verse, a statement talking about this perfect sacrifice, and the last statement of the chant, as it were the words, "And let all the people of Israel kill it." And as that statement was made, it had to be absolutely perfectly coincided with the moment when the sun disappeared below the horizon. So it was exactly, precisely at the moment when the last rim of the sun disappeared over the horizon, they had to come to that point. So even the timing of their words as they chanted this had to be absolutely precise. And they came to those words at that moment, and as the last rim of the sun disappeared, the priest with one stroke of the knife would come down across the throat of the lamb. It had to be done in such a way that it was killed with a single stroke, and that it was killed in such a way that the lamb did not cry out. If there was the slightest noise from the lamb, the sacrifice was ruined, and the whole process was imperfect, and the sacrifice was of no use for that day. So it was done very carefully with this participation of all of the people. The blood was caught in a golden vessel and was poured over the altar. And the sacrifice itself, the body of the lamb, was burned on the fire in this brazen altar. Now, the symbology of this particular step is to say, before you are entering into the consciousness of God, the physical must be consumed. And it's not just the physical body that you take the life or consciousness from and burn that. It's more than that. Remember that they didn't just select any animal. It had to be a perfect animal. It had to be a prized possession. Obviously, such an animal represented their greatest wealth. We're talking about a tribe of herdsmen. So we're talking about taking essentially their gold, their life force, that which made it possible for them to live and have wealth. They took the very best of it. There's part of this communication that is so important for us to hear if we are going to come anywhere close to duplicating what they did. We can, in fact, think of ourselves as very modern people who wouldn't practice animal sacrifices, and all of that blood and so on is very primitive and superstitious, and we're above that. But we need to think of the other side of that and say, these people were taking not just what was left over. When I have paid all of the bills and the rent and all of that is satisfied, I take a little bit of what is left and I give it to God if I can afford to this week. Look at the difference in the consciousness of these people and their relationship with God. They took the best that they had. That is suggesting not after I've paid the rent, not after I've fed the family. I don't take what is left over. I take the best and the highest. The most desirable part of what I have, I give daily to God. And that was the symbol of the perfection of their sacrifice. But it was more than that. It also said, I can't give to God a life that is with blemish. If I'm going to sacrifice myself, if I'm going to say, here God, take me and use me, I first want to clean up, I want to perfect what it is that I'm asking God to use. One thing that occurs to me, for example, is I know a lot of people who become channels. And one of the things that perhaps bothers me the most about channels is to read or hear a reading that has come from a channel and to notice that it's done with poor grammar. That bothers me. If you're going to give yourself to be a channel for God, then before you say, here God, take me, use my voice, use my words, allow me to be a channel of your words, one of the things that you ought to do is study grammar. Because you're not giving God a vessel that is fit for him to use as a channel. So that's what I'm saying. Whatever it is that I'm going to do for God, if I'm going to offer him my body, why am I going to give him something that isn't fit to use for the purpose that I'm giving it to be used? So there was this care in the sacrifice of the body that was given to try to make that perfect and without blemish in the sacrifice, to give the highest, the best, the most precious part of my effort daily given to him, and to burn and consume the physical as being what I refer to as life anyway. Before I enter the temple, I have made a statement. I have left aside the physical body, its senses, the animal qualities, sensuality, appetites, all of the things that relate to the physical, I have burned at the door to the temple. And having burned that, I have symbolized the consuming fire of spirit that burns away the lesser and leaves the life force that animated it is now what I am. So it's also a symbol of this recognition of the first step on those 12 schools. I am is taken care of here. I am not this body. I burn that. I sacrifice the best of what it is. I give it to God. It is consumed. It is now his. I don't have it in my possession. Now I can enter the first step in the temple. So I've gone beyond the feet and into the body. Now, when I refer to this as the human body, it also needs to be stated in a different way. According to this ancient tradition, there were 5 elements. There was earth, which is this outside curtain, and the structure of this was posts on which a curtain was hung. So this was a tent without a roof. Curtains around this structure. So this outer curtain was earth, and then there was water, because this second place here, the second circle that I've drawn here, was the altar of purification. It contained water for washing, and interestingly, this water altar was surrounded on all sides by mirrors. Mirrors were one of the most precious things that the women of Israel had. Most of them were stolen from the Egyptian women that they had worked for in coming out of Egypt. But these mirrors were very precious to the people of that time. They were highly polished brass in most cases, or gold, or some other precious metal. And they surrounded this altar of the water purification, the washing before entering into the next stage of the temple. What do you suppose a mirror would surround this place of purification for?
To look at yourself, see yourself more clearly.
Okay, to see yourself as you are, to see what you're washing, to see yourself as you wash, and to wash away the old image. Remember the second step in the 7 terraces? The second step is to see yourself as you are and die to that and become something else. But you can't die to what you are until you recognize what you see yourself as being. So you have to see yourself first, die to that, and become new in this water washing or this baptism. So there's the water element there. Inside here is a candlestick that burns with fire, the fire element, and the air element, and in here the akasha element. So there were all of these, the 4 elements that we usually think of, and the 5th, which is the ether or the akasha to them. So this is a representation of 5 elements, man being made of the lower 3, and the heavens of the higher 2. This is at the door to a section of the temple that is called the holy place. The holy place consisted of 2 cubes. The Holy of Holies of 1 cube of the 2. So we have 3 cubes here that are the heavenly Trinity, but we also have 3 parts of the temple. This outer court, or as it was called, the court of the Hebrews, and the holy place and the Holy of Holies. And these 3 were the 3 parts of the heavens. Man was said to take his body from the planets, his soul from the fixed stars, and his consciousness from the zodiac, the relationship of the celestial spheres to one another. And so these were the 3 parts of the celestial Trinity. So it was an attempt to create a diagram of the heavens, a diagram of man's body, and a diagram of the body of God. And it made a statement. It made a statement that the body of God is reflected in the construction of the cosmos, that man in turn is a reflection of the cosmos in miniature, a microcosm that is a reflection of the macrocosm. And then it said that the act of man approaching God is to go from being the microcosm into harmony with the macrocosm, and through that to the source of the macrocosm. So there are these three steps: going to earth, from earth into the heavens, into the creator of the heavens, were the three steps of enlightenment given here in the temple. So we have a combination of numbers now that may become confusing here, because there are 3 steps and there are 7 steps. And the 7 steps are the chakras, as we are going through to the highest of the chakras, which is here, and the lowest here. The place of power or energy or life in man, the sacrifice of the animal at the first chakra. And then the washing, seeing myself and regenerating. Entering here, I come to 2 things that are placed in this particular room. One is a 7-branched candlestick. The 7 branches of the candlestick, of course, relating to the 7 planets as they were thought of at that time, and the 7 seals of the human body, the 7 chakras, are also referred to as 7 lights, 7 enlightenments. And if I move through all 7 of the enlightenments, then I move into the Holy of Holies. So it represented the 7 steps that must be followed before the holiest place can be entered. The other thing that was contained in this room was a table for what was called showbread. The showbread was the recognition of Israel that anything that we have for sustenance is the gift of God. But it was also more than that. It was bread for a particular reason, and it was bread for the same reason that that bread was used with Melchizedek to form a ritual offering with Abraham, and for the same reason that Jesus used bread in his Last Supper. And it's probably best illustrated there. In this Last Supper with the apostles, Jesus attempted to communicate something extremely basic to the apostles and to get them to recognize it, because that was the power of regeneration. And what he said essentially when he was eating with them, he said, "This is my most important lesson to you." This is the 14th chapter of John, where he's saying, "I'm going to leave you now. And I'm leaving you not really because I want to, not really because it's time to, so much as because you're not responding appropriately." This is, in essence, what he said to them. He's saying, you have recognized in me some very special abilities. You have seen me heal, you've seen me do miracles and wonders, and you're very impressed by that. And as a result of it, you have worshipped me. But you've worshipped me and not listened to me at the same time. Because he said, what I have told you again and again is all of the things that I have done and all of the things that I can do, you can do as well. But you seem satisfied to let me do them and admire me for doing them, thus creating an even greater distance between you and me. And as long as I stay with you, it is unlikely that you will ever do them. You will simply depend on me to do them. And so for that very reason, I'm going to leave you. Because if I don't, you will never begin to do what it is that I've told you to do. So I'm going to leave. And they protested. If you leave, we'll never get it done. We need you now more than we ever have before, and all of that. He said, understand, I'm leaving for you. It is not something that you should be disappointed about that I'm leaving. I'm leaving for you. And as I leave, I'm going to go and prepare a place for you, and you can come and be with me. In the meantime, you must do everything that I've done. And their response is, how can we do these things? I mean, look at you. You're virgin born, you're a son of God, you're all of these things that we're not. And Jesus responded by taking a piece of bread and saying, you see this bread? When I eat it, it becomes my body, doesn't it? This is what my body is made out of, this bread. Now, what do you eat? You eat the same bread. We've broken it off the same piece. So out of this same loaf, I build a body, and you call it the body of God. And you're right, I am God, he said. But now you're eating the same bread. Doesn't it build the same body in you? And so he said, every time you take a piece of bread now, for the rest of your life, do it remembering this. Do it in remembrance of me, but in remembrance of me means, remember that my body is made out of the same thing your body is made out of, and your body can do the same thing that my body can do. And this, in essence, was what he demonstrated with this Last Supper. I think it's very amusing that ever since that we've turned it into a high church ritual and nobody knows what it means, and they sit there and cry and do all of these wonderful things with these little pieces of bread and don't know that when they get up they're supposed to do what Christ did. It was a simple communication and illustration of a very basic truth, and it also, you know, from what he said, it was not intended to be done once a week in church at a communion. He said, every time you eat for the rest of your life, do it this way. And if we understand what he said, every time we take food into our mouths, we look at that food and say, this has a capacity for building the body of Christ. That's what I'd expect it to do. And if it builds the body of Christ, then I'm Christ, and I should do the things that Christ did. So if it's magic, the magic of it is to make us into the body of Christ. Eating the body of Christ is to eat the expression of God in earth. And it's what the showbread was doing in this temple. That bread was baked and laying there on the table to say, this is the expression of God here in his temple. Now, as we eat bread from this earth, we eat God expressing himself in earth. We take into ourselves life force. The bread and the wine builds the body that is the body of God, and it is through that process that we become what God is. So the bread that they took was holy and rested in their temple as a reminder that the very act of eating, done consciously, builds the body of God. So there were these two elements that were there, the light and the bread, the light of heaven and the earth from which we build the instrument of God. Then at this place is a place of another altar, and this altar at the door to this Holy of Holies is the place of the larynx in the body, the voice box, the fifth chakra, and it was called the altar of incense, sweet-smelling incense. And in this place, inside the temple, incense was burnt, and then the high priest only one man in all of Israel could enter this last room. And in this last room was the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this place, the place of the voice box where we burn the holy incense, is the purification of the words and the will. And it was from this place of burning the incense that that the expression, our expression of words, thoughts, communication, was symbolized in this offering as burning the use of that for any lower purpose and allowing the incense, the sweetness of our words and our thoughts and our communication to rise from that place into heaven. And in fact, it was described by John in Revelation. He described the throne of God, and he described it as having from underneath that seat that God sits on the prayers of the righteous men curling up around the feet of God like sweet-smelling incense going up to his nostrils. The prayers of the saints were rising like incense from this altar. So this is the purification of man's word. The words of my mouth being purified and making sweet-smelling incense before God. After that purification, the priest entered through a veil. This was called the veil of the temple, the curtain that went across here. And this curtain was the curtain of the heavens. And it had woven into it the figures of angels. And the eyes of those angels appeared on the curtains as the stars in the heavens. As God curtained the heavens, and on the heavens were the eyes of the angels which we see as stars, so was this Holy of Holies curtained as the heavens, and the stars woven into the fabric around here, woven in gold into the fabric, were the eyes of angels representing the stars looking down on the altar in the Holy of Holies, which was a place that did have a covering. This did not out here. So it was a blackened room, and the only light in that room came from the Ark of the Covenant itself, which was structured in a particular way to be a source of energy, overlaid with gold and built to specific dimensions that made it a power generator. And that then was the seventh chakra. And there were two elements there that that made a connection between man and God. They were the elements of the Shekinah. The Shekinah was seen during the day as a column of smoke that hovered above this tabernacle. And according to the writing here, this column of smoke did not come from the sacrifices or from any source within the tabernacle, but it was a supernatural thing, like a cloud that hung over it, that came from God, not from man. And yet man's input into it was right consciousness. If the right consciousness was among the people, then that column of smoke could be seen. If the consciousness of the people was not right, then that column was not there. At night it appeared as a column of fire. So it was fire by night and smoke by day, so that they could be aware of this consciousness or presence that hovered over their tabernacle. And it was called the Shekinah. What is the Shekinah? According to the ancient Hebrews, the Shekinah was the mother god, or the feminine aspect of God. It was female. And it was the point of contact, or the womb, in which their consciousness was incubated that gave birth in the heavens. Or to reverse that, it was the womb in which God consciousness was incubated to reveal itself in earth. So it was that container in which our consciousness grows to be godlike. The Shekinah is also in another form, a more modern form. It is Queen Sabbath, Shabbat. It is the exoterically, externally, it is the day of the week in which we worship. The Sabbath day is Queen Sabbath and is the modern Shekinah. And the Hebrew homes are prepared for Queen Sabbath to come. They welcome her each weekend. Now, I say externally it is that because esoterically it is the welcoming into myself of the female within me that becomes the mother of the Christ. Queen Sabbath is Mary. And I take Mary into my home. My home is where I live. I take her into me. I prepare a meal for her, and I celebrate her coming every week, because she is the lover of God, and in me she gives birth to the child of God. So the Shekinah, Mary, Queen Sabbath, all of these are the same symbol of the soul that is the lover of God and gives birth to his child. And the tabernacle was her home. She hovered above the tabernacle, always available to give birth to the consciousness of the people and to form their holy relationship with their source, with God. So that's the tabernacle. What do you want to discuss about it?
What is basically, well, first of all, I lost chakras 4 and 3.
Okay. Let me see if I can number them here. number 1 and number 2. The veil here is number 3, the entrance. And these together are 4, 5. The veil again is 6, and 7 is the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies.
Also, what is the significance?
What is the significance of the veil being rent from top to bottom?
Okay, the veil being rent from top to bottom. We've gotten out of the tabernacle and we've gone into the temple. The veil was rent in the temple at the time of the crucifixion. It was not in the tabernacle. The temple in Jerusalem was built by the same design. The outer court was the court of the Hebrews, and there was an inner court called the Holy Place, and there was a Holy of Holies. Between the Holy Place and the Holy of Holies, there was a massive curtain, not comparable on scale to this. This would have been fairly easy to tear, either from bottom to top or from top to bottom. But in the temple itself, this was a massive thing, something like several inches thick and quite high. And a point was made that at the crucifixion, this veil was rent not from bottom to top, as a man might have to tear it if he was going to tear it at all, but it was rent from top to bottom. The rending of the veil is the tearing aside of the hidden. What was hidden from man was no longer hidden, and no longer would there be priests to represent God to us, but every man becomes his own priest after this veil is rent. Then no longer is it just the high priest himself who can enter the Holy of Holies, but the high priest was the one who was crucified. And in his crucifixion, he opened the door to the Holy of Holies to everyone who would prepare themselves to enter it. So the significance of that said, at this moment, the exoteric and the esoteric are no longer separated, but the esoteric is revealed for the people to know.
Was there something about that revelation?
Something about what?
Wasn't there something about the rending of the veil during the last days?
Not that I know of. I don't think so. Did you have something else? Okay. The egg shape that I put around it is the tribe of Levi around the tabernacle, and the rays going out are the separations between the other 12 tribes.
I'm wondering if that's possibly the reason why the ark is no longer with us, because we were supposed to learn to find it within ourselves rather than looking to somebody else.
Of course. You can't really say that the ark is no longer with us. You just have to say that it is now in us instead of with us.
But in an external form and ritual.
Yeah, this whole tabernacle was the body of man and contained this precious awareness of the relationship with God. Now, if we have that awareness in ourself, then we don't need this box to carry it in to remind us of it. On the other hand, I don't think that we have to make a choice between one or the other. It's nice to have both and I think it will be a beautiful experience for us to relocate the ark. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have it. It just means that it isn't essential for our relationship with the source.
I wonder if you could clarify for me what the element of fire is. As I understand it, earth symbolizes the physical body, and water symbolizes the emotions or feelings, and air symbolizes the intellect, but I always have trouble understanding what fire is. It's referred to as spirit and so on, things like that, but it's not exactly clear to me exactly what fire is the way the other three are, if my understanding of them is correct.
I think the best way to say it is that it is the ability of man to practice alchemy. It is the transformational ability, the ability of metamorphosis in man, the ability to change. That which consumes the old and gives birth to the new. It's also the fire of life in us, but it is that which allows for change.
There seems to be this theme prior to the rending of the veil that there was the esoteric knowledge that was withheld from the people, and even some knowledge that was felt was dangerous if the proper consciousness were not there to receive. With the rending of the veil, is that totally symbolic of the fact that now there is no separation if one but seeks?
That's right. Do you have a question?
Is the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle the same thing?
No. The Ark of the Covenant was kept in the tabernacle, but it's not the same thing. It is at number 7 up there in the Holy of Holies. The Ark of the Covenant was a wooden box that was carried on 2 poles, which contained the tablets on which the promises, the covenant of God was written. The tablets on which the 10 Commandments were written were encased in that box. It was overlaid with pure gold and had the image of 2 Sephiroth on top of it, or seraphim, which were winged creatures from which we get our image of angels with wings. Their wings were spread before them so that they touched over the center of the ark, and the place between those 2 angels that was surrounded by those wings was a place called the mercy seat. The seat of mercy on the top of that ark was the place in their consciousness where God sat in judgment on the people. So the priest would approach this ark as if it were a throne on which God was sitting on this mercy seat, and would approach God with the petition of the people, calling on God's mercy to form the relationship between the people and himself each year. It was entered only once a year. On this Day of Atonement, and on that day the covenant was renewed. And in fact, they observed a ritual on this day that I think is really interesting. When they came into Canaan carrying this tent, which they reconstructed everywhere they went as they moved through their wanderings the 40 years, at the end of the 40 years, they came into the Promised Land, and there are 2 mountains right at the place. I think you'll find this fascinating too. There are 2 mountains there and a valley between them. In this particular valley is a town in Israel that you read about more regularly than any other town in Israel. It's called Nablus. And it's a place where people are being killed constantly. They're always throwing rocks and always having trouble in that valley. And according to the people of Israel going into that valley, one of those mountains was Mount Nebo, the other was Horeb, and one of them was a positive and one was a negative. Now remember that the 10 Commandments are 5 negative statements and 5 positive statements. They divided the 12 tribes, 6 on one side, 6 on the other. And 6 of them went up the negative mountain, and 6 of them went up the positive mountain, and they shouted the commandments back and forth at each other to fill the atmosphere with these statements of God or these commandments, and it was that act that claimed the Holy Land as theirs. And it is between these two mountains in this valley that all this contention is going on between Israel and the Arab world. It is here that Israel took over that land a few thousand years ago and made it theirs and set those commandments in motion, the positive against the negative clashing between those two mountains to precipitate. Remember that when a positive meets a negative, it produces a result. It precipitates something. And the precipitation was to make that land theirs under the commandment of God. These commandments were kept in that box, and as they went along over time, the things that were kept in that box changed somewhat because they were all the holy relics. At one time, the showbread was kept in that box. A piece of manna was kept there permanently so that people could be reminded of how they were fed when they were in the wilderness. So it was a kind of reliquary for holding the most sacred objects of Israel.
When and where was the ark lost, or did it disappear, and when and where will it be discovered or reappear?
This one's Bible study. Prophecy is another week. Disappeared when the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. In fact, they attempted to conceal all the religious things. The one thing that they were able to conceal was the seven-branched candlestick. And the belief among Israel was that there was a tunnel underneath the temple in which the ark was carried, and it was concealed, but then was subsequently lost because all of those who knew its whereabouts died while they were in the Babylonian captivity. So there is a belief that it is buried on the Temple Mount, and I think that's quite accurate. As far as the discovery of it, that will be a very interesting time because it will not be discovered until, because of a major upset in that part of the world, when the Arabs no longer have their temple on the mount, there will be an attempt to reconstruct the temple by Israel. And when that attempt is begun, they will find the ark because it will be excavated. But it will not necessarily be a happy time because that's a world war at that time. Okay, we'll take one more question and then we'll talk about the Ten Commandments.
Okay, well, I think this might have to do with the Ten Commandments. I hope so anyway. In the first chapter of Joshua, the Lord makes the statement to him that this book of the law must ever be on your lips. You must keep it in mind day and night so that you may diligently observe all that is written in it. Then you will prosper and be successful in all that you do. And my question is, what specifically is the law that he is referring to here? Is it the Ten Commandments? Or is it another law, or is it, I hope it's not the whole book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
The law of the Lord is our, well, let's see. It's very difficult to state because it is not as simple as the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are statements of the law, but the law goes beyond any statement. The law of the Lord is the universal law that is set in motion, that if we obey it, we are in harmony with everything around us. If we disobey it, then we are in disharmony with some part of ourself or some part of nature. So the law of the Lord is harmony, peace, love, light, kindness. And in fact, it was summed up by Jesus when he said, This is the one law, and all the rest is nothing more than commentary. If you love yourself, God, and others equally, with no difference, but equally, then all other things will take care of themselves. It is the law of absolute love.
Okay, that's what you should meditate on day and night. Is that it? Is that what it's saying?
That's what the psalmist said.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Why don't we put the Ten Commandments up here on the board? Would you like to do that, Stephen? Would you like to take a break for a moment while we do that? It'll only take us a few minutes to go over the commandments, so if you want about maybe a 5-minute break just to stretch, then we'll go over these, and I want to show you an esoteric application of them instead of what we've thought of as the obvious, straightforward meaning.